Wait a little. Subscribe to my YouTube channel named Beyond the Veil. Hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to get first-hand share of new videos whenever I drop it. I opened the third locker. It was already inside. I was supposed to open the third locker because there wasn't supposed to be a third locker at all. And that's what still bothers me the most even now, because everything that happened after can be traced back to that one small moment where something existed that shouldn't have existed. And I chose not to question it hard enough, just enough to hesitate, not enough to stop. And that hesitation feels like the real beginning of everything. Not the sound I heard later, or the messages, or the way the lights started behaving, but that single quiet realization that something was slightly wrong, and I decided to keep going anyway. Because the hallway was empty, because it was late, because I had already stayed behind too long grading papers, and the security guard had done his usual round and left me with that offhand reminder that the back wing sometimes had faulty wiring. So if the lights flickered, I shouldn't panic. And I remember laughing. At that, I remember actually thinking it was comforting to have a logical explanation prepared in advance. Which feels ironic now, because logic was the first thing that stopped working. Not all at once, just in small ways, like the lockers, because there were only supposed to be 2 at the end of that corridor, old rusted ones nobody used anymore. But when I walked down there with my bag over my shoulder, I saw 3, evenly spaced, as if they had always been there. And I stopped and counted them twice, then once more just to be sure I wasn't misremembering something as simple as the number of lockers in a place. Wait a little. Subscribe to my YouTube channel named Beyond the Veil. Hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to get first-hand share of new videos whenever I drop it. I had worked for over 5 years, and I told myself maybe maintenance had added another one. Maybe I had just never paid attention. Because that's how your mind protects you at first. It gives you reasonable answers quickly, urgently, like it's trying to patch a crack before it spreads. And I accepted that answer long enough to walk closer, long enough to notice that the third locker didn't have a number like the others, just a blank metal plate where the number should have been. And that's when I felt the first real discomfort, not fear yet. It's a kind of unease that settles in your chest like something slightly heavier than it should be, and I remember reaching out and touching the handle because it looked newer than the others. Less rusted, smoother, and colder too, colder than the air around it, and I told myself again it was probably just because it had been installed recently. But when I pulled it open, it didn't creak like the others. It opened silently, and inside there was nothing except a folded piece of paper sitting exactly in the center of the empty space, as if it had been placed there deliberately, waiting for someone, waiting for me, though I didn't think that at the time, not consciously. I just thought it was strange that anyone would leave something in an unused locker in a part of the building no one came to anymore, and I almost didn't take it. I almost closed the door and walked away. But curiosity is a quiet kind of pressure. It doesn't shout. It just leans on you until you give in, and I reached in and picked up the paper, noticing how perfectly folded it was, precise, symmetrical, like it had been measured rather than casually folded. And when I unfolded it, I expected maybe a note from a student, something silly or forgotten. What I saw instead was a list, just a list of short sentences written in neat handwriting, each one on its own line. And I remember reading them once quickly without really processing them. Then again, more slowly, and the second time was when the unease deepened into something sharper, because the sentences didn't feel random. They felt specific. They felt like instructions, and they said things like, do not stay after the last bell. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn around. The third locker is not for storage. If the lights flicker twice, leave immediately. And the last one was underlined and written slightly larger than the rest. It said, if you find this, you have already stayed too long. And I stood there holding the paper, feeling that weight in my chest grow heavier because it was past the last bell, because I was alone in that hallway, because I had just opened the third locker. And for a moment I felt something close to fear, but it was still mixed with skepticism, still anchored in that need for logic. And I thought to myself it was a prank, something left by students who knew teachers sometimes stayed late. something designed to be unsettling, but ultimately harmless, and I even smiled a little at the thought of it. Though the smile didn't last long because that was when the lights flickered once, just once, quick and subtle, and I froze, not because of the list. I told myself it wasn't because of the list, it was just the wiring. The guard had warned me, and I took a breath and folded the paper back up, slipping it into my pocket like it was nothing more than a curiosity, and I closed the locker. And when I turned away, I made a decision without fully realizing it. I decided to leave. Not because I believed the note, but because suddenly staying didn't feel worth it. And I started walking back down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in that empty space in a way I had never really noticed before. And I was halfway to the exit when I heard it, another set of footsteps behind me, faint but distinct, slightly out of sync with my own. And I stopped instinctively. And the sound stopped too, and for a few seconds there was nothing but silence. And that was when the list came back to me, the line about footsteps, and I felt that sharper edge of fear cut a little deeper. And I told myself it was probably just an echo. The acoustics of the hallway, something simple, something explainable, and I forced myself to keep walking, a little faster now. And for a moment there was nothing, no sound but my own steps, and I almost convinced myself it had been nothing. Until I heard it again, this time closer, and I didn't stop immediately. I took 2 more steps, 3, hoping it would fade, hoping it would match my rhythm, but it didn't. It stayed just slightly off, just enough to feel like something separate, something following, and I stopped again. And again it stopped, and the silence that followed felt heavier than before, like it was waiting. And I remember thinking very clearly at that moment that if I turned around, I might see something I wouldn't understand, something that would make everything worse. And that thought didn't feel like mine, exactly. It felt like something the note had planted in me, something that had taken root faster than I wanted to admit. And I realized then that whether the list was real or not didn't matter anymore, because it had already changed the way I was thinking, the way I was reacting. And I stood there for a few seconds longer, trying to decide what to do. And then the lights flickered again, twice this time, quick and sharp, and that was enough. That was the moment where logic finally lost its grip. Not completely, but enough for instinct to take over. And I started walking again, faster now, almost a hurried pace. And I didn't look back, not once, even when the footsteps resumed, even when they seemed to come closer, matching me more closely now, but still not perfectly, still just off enough to feel wrong. And I reached the end of the hallway and pushed through the door into the main corridor, expecting to feel relief, expecting the normality of that space to break whatever tension had built up behind me. But the main corridor wasn't quite right either. The lights were dimmer than usual, the air felt still, and the sound of my footsteps didn't echo the same way. It was softer, almost muted. And when I turned to close the door behind me, I hesitated for just a second, just long enough to wonder if I should look back down the hallway, just long enough for that curiosity to press against me again. But I didn't give in. Wait a little. Subscribe to my YouTube channel named Beyond the Veil. Hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to get first-hand share of new videos whenever I drop it. I closed the door and kept moving, and that's when I noticed the lockers along the wall, rows of them stretching down the corridor. And at first nothing seemed unusual until I realized there were more of them than there should be. Not just one extra this time, but several, and they weren't evenly spaced like normal. Some were closer together, some slightly apart, as if the pattern had been altered in small, subtle ways, and I felt that same unease from earlier return, stronger now, more persistent. And I reached into my pocket and took out the paper again, unfolding it with hands that felt just a little less steady than before. And I read the lines again, slower this time, more carefully. And I noticed something I hadn't before, a line near the middle that I had somehow skipped over, or maybe it hadn't been there before, I couldn't be sure. But it said the building will adjust to you, not all at once. And I remember staring at that line for a long moment, trying to understand what it meant, trying to fit it into some kind of rational framework. But nothing about it made sense in a way that felt safe. And that was when I heard the footsteps again, not behind me this time, but somewhere ahead, faint, almost like they were coming from around the corner. And I realized then that Whatever had been following me might not be behind me anymore. And that thought was worse, much worse, because it meant I didn't know where it was, and I stood there in that dim corridor with the paper in my hand, listening, trying to decide whether to move forward or turn back. And for the first time, I felt truly unsure of which direction was safer, because the hallway behind me had already changed. The lockers had already multiplied, and the note in my hand had already begun to rewrite itself in ways I couldn't fully track, and I had the distinct, quiet realization that leaving the building might not be as simple as reaching the exit anymore, that something had shifted in a way that wasn't bound by the normal rules of space or time. And that realization didn't come with panic, not yet. It came with a slow creeping awareness that whatever was happening wasn't going to end quickly, that it was going to unfold in stages, each one just slightly more unsettling than the last, each one building on the previous in ways that would only become clear after the fact. And I folded the paper again more carefully this time, as if it had become something fragile or important, and I put it back in my pocket and I started walking forward, because standing still didn't feel like an option anymore. And as I moved down that corridor with its uneven rows of lockers and its dim, flickering lights, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had noticed me the moment I opened that third locker, something that had been waiting not just for anyone, but for someone who would hesitate just enough to look inside, someone who would read the list and choose to keep going anyway. And, as that thought settled in, quiet and persistent, I found myself wondering not how to get out, but how long it had already been watching before I ever realized I was there. Wait a little. Subscribe to my YouTube channel named Beyond the Veil. Hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to get first-hand share of new videos whenever I drop it.